Thank you, Chair. Through you, I want to thank all the witnesses for coming out today. It's a really important issue to be brought here to this committee. My first question I'm going to ask Mr. Hall. Cambridge is a hub of the trucking sector, so I've heard from many people who tell me they feel uneasy when they're driving on the road with transport trucks, and more so with all the increased accidents, unsafe driving that is witnessed. Recently, many are calling our northern roads a death trap. From your experience, how would you assess the overall safety standards in the trucking sector, both in terms of driver training and truck maintenance? And what concerns do you see on the road today? And would a national strategy help resolve the issues?
Recently, you've seen driver schools put out of business for unfit practices. That has contributed towards the poor quality of the drivers that are on the road. I mentioned the Northern Ontario part of it. Poor road conditions contribute, but some of these drivers shouldn't be allowed to go further north than Barrie without training. Drivers need to be trained. I would recommend personally to have a graduated license system. Today, our drivers can go 3-month program, and here's your B train loaded with 150,000 pounds of gasoline and take it to Vancouver. They don't have training for that, so they definitely need more training. Right. A national program would help, and I'd love to be a part of trying to arrange it.
You also noted that a lack of adequate rest areas on the highways across Canada has real labour force impacts, and women drivers often face added challenges when safe facilities aren't available. Given the federal role in extra-provincial trucking and national transportation corridors, can you expand on how the shortage of safe rest area affects drivers and what federal measures could help address it?
So it's gotten worse since the hours of service laws changed a few years back, where drivers try to maximize everything. They don't do split sleeper berths, so if they don't plan their trips appropriately, or if they get delayed due to accidents, traffic, weather, they end up stopping in places that don't have services. I believe we have added 2 rest areas in Northern Ontario. One is Batchewana Bay, one is right at the Manitoba border. I believe the one at Batchewana Bay has parking for 6 trucks. Well, I can tell you last week the road was closed at Batchewana Bay for 39 hours. 6 trucks can park there. 6 trucks can go to the washroom there. The other, I'm going to guess, 1,000 can't.
Okay.
So it's huge.
My next question is for Mr. Ludwig. Thank you for coming today. You have operated a family-run trucking company in Simcoe for decades, moving freight through local roads, border routes, and regional supply chains that communities in southwestern Ontario rely on every day. In your testimony, you underline how Driver Inc. isn't just a labour issue, but a safety governance failure. From what you see on the ground in and around Simcoe, what risk does this enforcement gap pose to public safety, accountability, and standards like hours of service and vehicle maintenance? And do you believe the federal government has treated those risks with the same seriousness as other transportation safety issues?
The short answer is no. In our area, we don't see a lot of that problem, but we travel to areas where we do see that as being an issue. The drivers that aren't trained properly, that are skirting the law, they're simply not safe. They don't worry about what their equipment is like. They go around scales. They go to places where they can't get caught. One of our big lanes is between the Fort Erie border and CP Rail in Vaughan. Lots of times my guys are running up and down the QEW doing their thing, doing what they're supposed to do. We'll see guys traveling all the way out as far as Brantford, to bypass scales and get around and go up Highway 6 and cut back into Toronto the back way because the equipment is just simply not safe. The rest of your question, I'm sorry?
Well, I can go on about insurance costs are going up. And I'm wondering if you think insurance costs are increasing from the crime or the drivers or businesses that are not properly insured.
My insurance costs are not going up, but because I run a very safe company. Insurance costs in general, I think, are probably going up because of a lack of safe drivers, more exposure to lawsuits within the marketplace. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets one that's $1 billion. It's already happened in Florida. It's only a matter of time before it comes here.
Okay, and can I go back to Mr. Hall? We're hearing more and more about mental health being a real challenge across the country, and truckers are no exception. Long hours, isolation, stress, and time away from family can take a real toll. With most trucks now monitored through federally mandated electronic logging and where many drivers are paid by the mile, do you feel this federally regulated structure creates pressure on drivers or encourages unnecessary risk as they try to maximize their mileage within the allowable driving time?
I feel the hours of service that is created now is fair to drivers. I feel the structure of it creates some pressure on drivers. I'll give an example of that. The next town I can stop in Northern Ontario is Thunder Bay, and right now I'm in Marathon. It's a 3-hour drive, and an hour in there's an accident that shuts the road down, the 2-lane road I will add. That shuts the road down for 2 hours. There is nowhere else for drivers to stop. So the hours of service contributes to mental health on one side. It also, the structure helps.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cody.
Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. It's interesting to say that I'm pleased to speak to you. It's unfortunate to see that the situation that I'm hearing about from those who are in the industry in Quebec, their perspective is very, very similar to yours. Some witnesses have come to committee to say that things were going well, that the Driver Inc. model was great, but I'm happy to hear that that's not the case and to have a different perspective. I would like to hear about your experience. Do you believe that the increase in that Driver Inc. phenomenon is linked to the number of accidents on the road? And if so, what is the link to be made between the two? I'll start with Mr. Ludwig and perhaps Mr. Hall afterwards.
Does Driver Inc. lead to safety problems, is what I get that you're asking. Yes, there is no question that it leads to safety problems. So a Driver Inc. driver could come and drive for me, and I would know that he has put in his 14-hour shift. And then he could drive over to Jeff's place and drive for him and put in another 14 hours. And nobody knows that this man has just worked for 28 hours straight with no sleep. Clearly, that's a problem out there on the streets. When Driver Inc. drivers are, what's the best way to, they're made responsible for equipment that they don't own. So if that driver's in an accident, where does the police or the MTO or SAEQ or whoever, where do they go to find the maintenance records, the hours of service records, the qualification records, everything that we as legitimate carriers, when you ask for, I can have to you in 10 minutes. You know, they're all scanned, all the maintenance, everything. You can't do that with a Driver Inc. fleet because that information is simply not readily available. And that puts, with these people, they know that, and so they get away with just driving junk and not caring about who they run into, who they run over.
Il y a des gens qui nous ont dit au comité que
Some have told us that there are people who no longer want to drive. Former drivers say that they're leaving the industry because it's no longer safe. Is that something that you've heard from drivers who are leaving because of the high number of incompetent drivers and Driver Inc. drivers? Perhaps Mr. Hall and then Mr. Ludwig?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't get that too much with my drivers because we drive in a different area. But I can imagine Jeff's drivers who have to drive up 11 and 17 on the Trans-Canada going that way. It's like murderer's row. It's a terrible thing to say. But the chances of a driver getting in an accident up there, probably 10 times than what they are here, maybe more. It's inevitable that you're going to get in one. You know, I would think if you drove 5 years up there, you would have at least one. And not being your fault, someone would run into you. And typically it's another truck. When another truck ranging from anywhere from 80,000 to 140,000 pounds runs into you at 100 or 105 kilometers an hour, one can imagine that there's not going to be too many survivors. Do you want to be one of those statistics? No, not me, not a lot of drivers. I can understand why they want to get out.
Monsieur Hall, voulez-vous commenter?
Mr. Hall, would you like to comment?
Yes, absolutely. One leads to the next. The driver Inc. is tax evasion. The driver Inc. then leads to equipment maintenance evasion. It leads to hauling illegal loads, not employing, but hiring illegal people. It's all blended in together. Have we lost drivers that are afraid to go to, I'll use Northern Ontario specifically because it's near and dear to me? Absolutely we have. The caliber of driver has decreased exponentially across the country. It's exaggerated in Northern Ontario, specifically in the area that I mentioned to you along the east end of Lake Superior. You've got wildlife to contend with, you've got weather, you've got hills, and inexperienced drivers and poorly maintained roads. So one definitely blends into the other one.
Quelle est la proportion que vous estimeriez?
What would be the proportion of those using Driver Inc. in the industry? Is it 5%, 10, 50%? Do you have an idea?
Une approximation?
Could you give us an estimate?
Of an idea of
Percentage?
Yeah.
the percentage of drivers that are in that area that are Driver Inc. Quite a few. There was at one time companies that would take the mileage from a mileage program that said it was X number of miles from Toronto to Vancouver and it should take 53.4 hours to drive that route. So they would pay the minimum wage for the number of hours. Well,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ludwig. Merci, Mr. Barcelona-Duval. Next, we'll go to Mr. Motz. Mr. Motz, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, witnesses. Stacey, nice to see you. I'm going to keep you busy for the next 5 minutes. Great to have you as a witness, and you bring a different issue to this whole trucking conversation than Drivers Inc. And I was intrigued to hear about the whole idea behind the bonding and the failure to have security bonds. So you touched on it before you relinquished your time. In your view, what's the impact of having bonded carriers who aren't bonded or bonding brokers who aren't secured, freight brokers, on road safety, on the manufacturers, carriers, and market fairness?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could just share with you a simple scenario here. So Bob one day was sitting in his basement and was talking to a friend, Scott. And Scott works at a manufacturing plant and expressed his struggle with trying to find a truck for a shipment leaving his facility. Well, wouldn't you know it, Bob is now selling loads to trucking companies that his buddy Scott gave him. Bob just opened up his computer and called himself a freight broker. Bob puts the load on the load board. He's not trained, he's not experienced in finding qualified carriers. The only thing Bob really cares about is how much money he makes at the end of the day. So Bob sells the load to ABC Trucking Company for $800. ABC Trucking needs this load to get the driver back home. Bob invoices his buddy for $2,500, and Bob just made $1,700 with no concern for who he entrusted that load with or who's actually behind the wheel. And this tends to relate to the Driving Inc. We need to know who's behind the wheel. So first, Bob's also irresponsible, and he takes out his friends and spends all the money, even the $800 to pay ABC Trucking. Now, that's like an exact scenario of, what it would look like as a broker, some brokers, I should add. So there's 3 issues here. And number 1 is ABC didn't get paid. The financial pressures forces carriers to cut corners and hire underqualified drivers and delay critical repairs and maintenance. And secondly, Bob can operate without any training, industry knowledge, and he has no financial risk of his own. So he doesn't employ drivers, yet he controls the decisions that directly impact who's on the road. So, and then the last thing is the broker boards. They're not required to have any oversight. So the load boards, they collect $800 a month from ABC Trucking Company, and they collect $800 from Bob. So as long as both parties continue to pay, the system functions financially. So
Right. So what you're saying, and you said it briefly, is the scam on the freight brokers not having security goes hand in hand with Drivers Inc. and the challenges that we have with that unscrupulous drivers and companies that follow along there. Now, it's probably impossible to try and put an economic figure behind this. You talked about road safety, and the other gentleman from Ludwig and Hall certainly covered some of that. So in my limited time, I'm solutions orientated. So you have this problem with Drivers Inc. You have this problem with the brokers. What's the solution? How does the government properly introduce legislation, regulations to make this work?
15-second response, please.
So when responsibility is clearly defined and enforced at each level of the financial transaction in the trucking industry, safety stops being an afterthought and it starts becoming the foundation of the system.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horlings, and thank you very much, Mr. Motz.
Thank you, Chair. You both brought up challenges and the fact that this is a terrible phenomenon that has horrible impacts on safety. Is this also something that has an impact on your business numbers? And if nothing is done, do you believe that you will be able to pass on your businesses to a future generation? How long do you think you will last? Mr. Hall?
What is happening and the effect on our business is from the dollar point of view. So the less scrupulous carriers are driving rates down. They'll go into our best customers and convince them that they can do this for less. Our best customers put pressure on us. They don't necessarily walk, but they put pressure on us and say, hey, XYZ's doing this for $500 less, so okay, I'll do it for $250 less. At the end of the day, we need our customers to be our business partners. We need to be profitable. Profit in the trucking industry seems to be a bad word. And customers will pay for it if there aren't people out there cutting corners and offering to do it for less.
Monsieur Ludwig, avez-vous quelque chose à ajouter?
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Ludwig?
Our business probably will not be here by the end of 2027 if the problem of Driver Inc. and road safety is not solved. That's just the simple economic numbers. We burned our war chest through this past, through this past economic downturn. The unreasonable pressure from Driver Inc. fleets is pretty much unbearable. I just don't see a fiscal way forward beyond this for too much longer. There's no point in throwing big money at that.
À ce moment-là, comment vous expliquez que
Both of you are carriers who are always have to do inspections, and yet less work is being done to inspect these drivers from Driver Inc. Do you believe that the federal approach is the right one? 15 seconds.
I think increased federal guidelines is the right way to go, and let the provinces follow, but hold the provinces accountable to meet the federal standard.
Merci, Mr. Ludwig. Thank you very much. Merci, Mr. Barclay-Duval. Next, we'll go to Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. And I'll start with you, Ms. Orlings. And I'll actually carry on from my colleagues' questions. And so you have said that the lack of carriers having a necessity to have a bond or insurance is inhibiting the ability to have safe vehicles. In general, my principle with respect to federalism is national where necessary, provincial where possible. I very much think that in this case it is that we do need national involvement, national data, national licensing, and perhaps national insurance there. Would you agree with those comments? And if so, please tell me why.
Yes, I do agree with those comments. Even in terms of a surety bond and coordinating with the United States FMCSA, if a broker decides to not pay a trucking company in the U.S., and I try and go after their bond and collect, sometimes I will get that hard no because it delivered on the Canadian side or it picked up on the Canadian side. And so, from a national standpoint, absolutely, there needs to be.
Ms. Orlings, can I just pick up on what you just said there? So if you were making a claim, it would be easier to collect from a U.S. carrier than it would be from a Canadian carrier? Or did I misunderstand?
So technically, yes, it would be easier because there's nothing in place in Canada that protects to collect money. With the U.S., at least there's a surety bond that allows us to try and collect.
Thank you very much for that. That's some very helpful testimony. At this point, Mr. Hall and Mr. Ludwig, I'll turn to you. Mr. Ludwig, thank you for your very candid conversation. It can't be easy to say the words that you just said. One of my suspicions is that the driver's Inc. is an issue. Don't get me wrong, but it's also a symptom that it's not just the missing out on CPP and other that are actually doing it. I believe that there's also a greater association with things like not doing proper training, not doing proper vehicle maintenance. Would either of you agree with that?
You, sir, are absolutely correct.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. The other thing is, Mr. Ludwig, with your testimony, it really brought it home to me that as much as these conversations are necessary, it's really now is the time for action, and that if the federal government doesn't take action within a reasonable time, irreparable harm will be done to your very important industry. Would you also agree with that, and maybe expand on some of the potential impacts?
Yes, absolutely. The choice I face today, as we're moving forward, and I've said probably the end of 2027, if we do nothing, is I have to decide, is my company going to continue? And if it is, and you don't do anything, then I have to go with the Driver Inc. model. Otherwise, I'm done. I just can't make enough money to stay alive.
Mr. Hall, would you like to comment on that?
Wages are probably the highest percentage of our costs, seconded by fuel. We have about a 30% uptick in accessorial costs with our wages. If we can eliminate that and join the Driver Inc. field, and then if we can eliminate the effort that we put into repairs and maintenance in our equipment, then we can lower prices, but we're not doing anybody any favors. There will be no future for family businesses in trucking.
And would you also agree with Mr. or Ms. Orlings that at least there's a need out there for national information? And to me, the lack of national information, the lack of enforcement is one of the things that is driving a race to the bottom. Would you agree with that as well?
I would as well.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence.